This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com.
Alpha Natural Resources. Consistent with its Running Right process, Alpha is an energy company committed to being a leader in mine safety and an environmental steward. We fuel progress around the world. More information at alphanr.com.
Haley Buick GMC, the place for a new Verano or Terrain Denali, on Midlothian Turnpike in Richmond and online at haleybuickgmc.com. Taking it to the streets and helping our community. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Information at vachamber.com.
I just received a letter from a student who thanked me for instilling the love of math in him. That's why I teach.
Brought to you by the Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and a welcome back to Secretary Aubrey Lane, Secretary of Transportation. Appreciate your coming back and helping our viewers around the Commonwealth know what's happening in transportation. I mean, the roads are crowded and busy. People are moving about, the trains, the airports, the port. Start at any point and give us an update about what's happening.
Well, again, thanks for having me back, David. And you are right, things are happening in Virginia. Over the last 18 months, I've been working with Governor McAuliffe and making sure we pick the right projects and being good stewards. And that's resulted in a lot of good things happening here. Let me first start with some of the legislation we talked about last time. Yes. Coming on the heels of the General Assembly a couple years ago putting more money into transportation, we worked last year on that first part of Governor McAuliffe's plan, is picking the right projects, and that was House Bill 2. We've worked hard on that the last year. This is the prioritization and scoring that the Commonwealth Transportation Board will use in selecting projects. Like I say, the last year I've been working around the Commonwealth with the localities and the regions, and I'm happy to say this past June, just a month ago, the Commonwealth Transportation Board adopted those new guidelines. And so they're actually no longer talking about it. We're actually going to be using them. And in fact, this August we'll be scoring projects for the first time. So that means that all the new construction that happens in the Commonwealth will now go through a competitive process. So we hopefully will get the second part of what Governor McAuliffe talked about, being good fiduciaries, picking the right project and making sure it is also the sound project fiscally to do, because besides those factors of scoring like congestion mitigation, economic development, and safety and other issues, there's also a return on investment calculation that we go through. So hopefully it'll level the playing field and make us be better stewards and take some of the politics out of that process. Now, when we went around the state looking at all that, it became apparent that a couple of things might be helpful. One is if we could push decision making down to the regional level, that would help. And also notice that the state of our current road system could be in better shape. So that led us to working this year, again, like we did under House Bill 2, House Bill 1887, with the senior leadership in both parties, again, another bipartisan and bicameral accomplishment, where 1887 now, for the first time, recognizes that we've also got to take care of our current system as well as new capacity. For the first time in many years, we've aligned the needs of the Commonwealth with the funding sources. So the first 45% of monies that now go into our 6-year construction plan go to current state of good repair. Those projects like bridges and roadways that we've been neglecting over the last quite frankly, 10 years or so because of our money situation. Now we've recognized that, and we all saw in the paper how Virginia, like a lot of the nation, has a lot of needs. Well, now this will start bending the curve back our way and getting the current infrastructure and our bridges and secondary roads back into shape. And the good news about it, David, is that money goes immediately to the construction districts. And it's asset managed by VDOT. So they pick the worst projects in each, the worst condition projects in each district. And that money gets allocated and it goes right to them. So that was a big part of House Bill 1887, tying this all together. It also then recognized that while we had statewide projects, we also had regional needs. In fact, most of our transportation solutions have to solve regional problems. And so House Bill 1887 divides the remaining monies up between the state and the construction districts. So every district in the Commonwealth will get money for their new projects. There'll still be a pot left of money at the statewide for these regionally statewide projects, and then of course the monies that went to state of good repair. So for the first time since really the 1930s, every project that gets in our 6-year plan either will be asset managed by VDOT or will go through a competitive scoring at the local or state level. So hopefully our citizens and our taxpayers can see the benefits of picking the right projects and being good stewards. So very happy about doing that, and that's led to a lot of things happening in the Commonwealth. We have new construction projects. Of course, the big one we're talking about in Northern Virginia is Interstate 66 being done, again, the planning stages, but Route 29 in Charlottesville moving forward. So I'm really, really happy that I think we've set it up so that we can make these agencies much more efficient. VDOT can get back to building roads instead of the politics of it. The Commonwealth Transportation Board really now the charge with picking those right projects through this less political process.
You know, sometimes we, the travelers, complain about the state of the roads, but as one who recently had a road trip halfway across the U.S., I could say there were other states having challenges and probably having the revenue that was needed to maintain even the interstate highways. And part of that may play into the issues of what's happening on the federal level.
No, Dave, you're exactly right. Virginia did take the hard decision a couple of years ago, and again, my hat's off to our legislators and the administration for taking that hard step of putting new monies into the state. And that's benefited us. I also travel up and down 95 quite a bit.
Right.
You can tell the states that are putting money into transportation. Right. But it is important, and your point is well taken, that we have to have a federal partner that is reliable. And right now, for the last few years, that hadn't been the case. As a matter of fact, if nothing happens in the next 17 days or so, the trust fund, federal trust fund, will again become insolvent. In fact, it's even worse this time because the actual authorization of the monies runs out. And we're hoping they'll do the right thing and do a long-term fix, but that has not been what they've done in the past. They've simply pushed it down the road a few months. That makes it awfully difficult to plan these major projects. And when 50% of our new construction monies here in the Commonwealth come from our federal partners, and had the opportunity to speak on this in Capitol Hill. In fact, just spoke other day about this with Undersecretary Peter Rogoff about the need for the federal partners to be three things. They need to be reliable, sustainable, and they need to talk about growth in the system. And it also needs to be multimodal. Those three things are very important to the Commonwealth of Virginia to deliver the program that's needed by the citizens to solve the transportation problem. So we're hopeful that Congress does the right thing. Governor McAuliffe has been a big advocate for additional funding at the federal level. We hope they'll do the right thing, but we'll know here in about 17 days what we've got. But the key is that we have a contingency plan, and Virginia is prudent users of its taxpayer dollars. But it would be very costly if we were to stop these projects here in August, the prime building season. And we've had major stuff. Right. And so we have a contingency plan, and hopefully we won't have to use it, but we're going to continue building as long as we can because to stop it would cost us more money.
You know, I always think of transportation as being nonpartisan. I mean, everyone, whether they're left, right, center, tea or coffee or whatever party they are, they're using the transportation system in the Commonwealth, and it needs to be funded or it brings us all to a halt.
Well, it gets back to, and I know Governor McAuliffe has been very, very big advocate on this, that transportation is a core function of government.
Yes.
In fact, if you look at some of the first laws made in the Commonwealth of Virginia, it was for the protection of roadways and more waterways, which we use at our nation's beginning. And I think they realized without that they couldn't have an economy. And Governor McAuliffe speaks all the time about this new Virginia economy. Well, transportation, efficient movement of goods and services is so key to that. And I think our forefathers understood that, because if you don't have an economy, how can you really be free? So we do believe it's a core function of government. And to your point, everyone I talk to says, yes, we need to do this. But to date, our congressional partners have not found the political will to get it done. And they've let, I believe, political ideology get in the way of this very, very important part of our daily lives. Transportation is almost like electricity. You just expect it to be there to use. It's not free. Hopefully they'll make the hard decisions. I don't think it's a silver bullet. But if you recognize it's a core function of government, can't believe we can't find a way to get this done. And I think it will also not only help us with transportation, but it'll put some people to work.
You know, some of us can dig way back and remember that the interstate system, President Eisenhower, that part of that was also for military preparedness. And if the system is not good for that way, I mean, that was probably one of the pushes to get interstate highways.
As a matter of fact, I watched over the July 4th weekend, there was I think it was on the History Channel, about our nation's history. And it spoke on that very point. And in fact, whenever there's been a significant transportation need, our federal government has stepped up and been the instigator.
Yes.
And so you mentioned that's right in the 50s with President Eisenhower. Well, think about it now. These roads are 60 years old.
Yes.
They're going on that. They have to be redone. We haven't had significant additions really since the 50s for our capacity. So it is very important. And I'm from Hampton Roads. Military presence down there, extremely important, almost 50% of our economy. And we heard loud and clear, if we didn't deal with transportation down there, it was no longer going to be just a quality of life issue. It was a military readiness issue in getting assets around. So again, David, I could not agree more. I think our federal government needs to come to grips with this political will to get something done. It's in our nation's and currently our state's best interest for them to do so.
Well, here in the Commonwealth, there's been some real success with public-private partnerships. How is that moving along?
There has, and Governor McAuliffe and I have been consistent in our message to deliver the transportation projects that we have to in the Commonwealth. These major projects, public-private partnerships have to be a big part of that. But we take a little bit different view, and I've spent a lot of time with Senator Stosh, who was the author of the P3 legislation here in Virginia. By the way, Walter gave me my first job. I'm an accountant out of University of Richmond, so I've known him for many years. It was always intended to used as a tool in our tool bag, never meant to default to a political ideology. The real thing that we need to do is to get the right transportation project and then figure out how to finance it. And that's really what a P3 is working with our private partners and getting the right financing. But we've got to get the right project. One of the things Governor McAuliffe did lead the effort on, and worked with Chairman Jones, Chris Jones of Appropriations, is reforming our P3 process. And unfortunately, we had a couple of deals here in the Commonwealth. Route 460, the downtown Midtown Tunnel, didn't work out exactly the way we had planned. Don't blame our, Governor McAuliffe has been clear, don't blame our private parties. They were negotiating in good faith, but the Commonwealth has got to make sure it looks out for itself. What we've done with this new legislation is to say this is a very important piece, but it's got to be more transparent and it's got to be done from the state's interest in the interest of our taxpayers. That's our fiduciaries. So under House Bill 1886, there's a new steering committee, which the legislative branch is a part of, that has to affirm that going out of the normal procurement cycle for a public-private partnership is in the best interest of our taxpayers. And what's really important to me, another part of this is once you perform the deal, the Secretary of Transportation has to reaffirm that the deal that was delivered what was intentionally meant for the taxpayers, and the protections are there. So very much a big believer in public-private partnerships. Interstate 66, we're now looking at whether that should be financed that way or through a public financing. We're going to explore alternatives, and then we'll make the best recommendation that gives us the transportation project we need, but also is in the public's best interest.
Well, it's good to have a Senator Walter Stosh trained accountant to be helpful to, along with your staff, to look that over and to make sure.
It really has been. I think if you look back at some of the issues we've had to deal with, there really haven't been engineering issues. They've been the issue of allocating risk and making sure the taxpayer is protected, or getting, when you're negotiating with the third parties, making sure you're getting a good value for the risk
Right.
or reward that you give up. And that's really the key. I don't see how as Secretary of Transportation I can do that without first looking at how we could do it ourselves, seeing this is what it cost us, and then to say, okay, let's see if we can bring a private party in to share that risk. By the way, Governor McAuliffe has been clear on this. How much money they make on them, not a concern to us on the private side. What is a concern is that we get the best deal for the taxpayers and that we get good benefit for the rewards that we give up or the risk that we share. So that's the process we'll go through. Will not be ideologically driven. It'll be an accounting background.
Yes,
Governor
yes.
McAuliffe told me the other day, there's really not a lot of drama with you, and I take that as a compliment
Yes.
because I try to follow the data and make the best recommendation to him, to the Commonwealth Transportation Board that I can.
We talked when we had conversation some months ago about the Port of Virginia.
Yes.
Any update on what's happening at the port?
Yeah, really do. What a great success story, and I think Governor McAuliffe will have a big announcement coming up here in the next month or so. When we came in, the port had losses, sustained losses in 5 of the last, I think, 5 or 6 years. That trend has been turned around. The governor reconstituted the port board. We now have new executive leadership. He's been there over a year now. John Reinhardt's just doing a fabulous job. New board chair, we actually came back, John Milliken, with the primary focus on making that the best port on the East Coast. Now, got a long ways to go operationally, but fiscally, we have turned around a loss into a profit. The profit's not to say, hey, look at us. It's to make sure we can make that port, make the investment, and continue to sustain that port. I think you'll see the governor have a big announcement on that, but it's good news, and I think you'll see the governor leading the charge that we've got to invest in that port. If we truly are going to have a new Virginia economy where we don't want to lose one nickel we get from defense or Department of our federal government spending. But with sequestration and other things on the horizon, we've got to diversify the economy. The port can be a big, big point of reference for that. And I think you'll see the governor say, we've got to invest in this port. In fact, I was at a meeting with Secretary Fox down in Raleigh about a month ago, and we had Maryland and Virginia and North Carolina and South Carolina and Georgia were the participants. And the Secretary asked about the investment in all those states' ports. We had the least investment. If you looked at Maryland or North Carolina, hundreds of millions of dollars that were being put in their ports. We have not done that here in the Commonwealth. We now have it to where it's sustainable, it's credible from its fiscal operations. If we don't put in that, we're going to lose ground to our neighbors. We have great competitive advantages, natural advantages with a deep water harbor, no overhead obstructions. So it's time for us to invest in this port, and I think you'll see Governor McAuliffe out there now that we have it where it has its credibility back, that we know if we put money in there, it's going to be spent wisely by making the Commonwealth a much more productive entity. 1 out of anywhere between 8 or 9 jobs in the Commonwealth are directly related to that port. So very important for us.
1 out of 8 or 9.
That's right. 1 out of 8 or 9, either
Wow.
directly or
Yes.
indirectly
Yes.
related to the Port of Virginia.
What about rail? What's happening in rail and transportation of goods and transportation of people?
Well, a couple of exciting things, particularly in projects here in the Richmond area. In terms of transit, then I'll get into rail, but in
Yes.
transit, bus rapid transit is being done here in Richmond here, working with Department of Rail and Public Transit and getting that project going.
Oh, excellent.
In Hampton Roads, we'll get into rail now. The light rail project will be extending light rail from Virginia out to Virginia Beach from Norfolk. Of course, we're looking at passenger rail extensions. 2 more to Norfolk, another to Lynchburg, and of course we're working with WMATA and looking at their investment and expansion to 8-car trains. In fact, the Governor and I are with Secretary Fox this week talking about WMATA and that investment. But the key will be the 95 corridor and getting additional capacity. Most Virginians don't realize that if you talk about rail or transit in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the 95 corridor is key. All those trains and all that freight that moves to our port goes through that corridor. So getting additional capacity, we're working with our partners there at CSX and to a lesser extent Norfolk Southern, and getting capacity in that corridor so we can expand it to help move our economy. So working with that will be a big priority over the next year.
Well, there's certainly a great deal going on, and it all sounds exciting. It sounds like it'd be better for the quality of life as well as for economic development.
I think that's key to it. I tell people I come from a business background, not either encumbered nor blessed with an engineering degree. So I look at things more from a practical, pragmatic solution. Governor and I respond well on that together. And if you're really what are we building these things for? If you're adding a road or adding modal transportation, if you're not making people's lives better or making our economy more efficient, that's really why we should do this, trying to take pragmatic approaches and solutions that it makes us good fiduciaries to support this economy, because that's really what transportation should be doing.
Now, we haven't mentioned air, and you have an aviation board under your auspices. Any word about how our airports are doing?
Yes, in fact, we're going through. In fact, when I first came into office and talking with the governor, I looked and there really hadn't been a review of air in a while in the Commonwealth, air services. And, there's been a lot of changes in that industry. Key to that is Dulles. As Dulles Airport goes to the Commonwealth of Virginia, because many of our connections to the world go through Dulles. That's had some issues that Governor McAuliffe's been working on in regards to the restructuring of the air landing rights versus there in Reagan. We're working on that with not only our state but our national partners in that. But the Commonwealth of Virginia is made up of mainly a bunch of feeder airports when you get outside of Dulles. We're looking at how we can make those more efficiently. We really have 3 sections. We've got the eastern section with Norfolk and the peninsula, and even this area, Richmond. Then you've got the western part of the state with Roanoke, Lynchburg, and Charlottesville, and then you got Northern Virginia. Those are looked at by our carriers as regional, how they allocate slots and all. So we'll be looking at how we can be more effectively negotiating with them. This high-level study, unfortunately, is going to point out that we've lost air service here in the Commonwealth as a result of the carriers consolidating. We've got to find a way to get that back. We put new signage up now. The Governor McAuliffe, every new airport says, "Welcome to Virginia."
Yes,
that's what we want to do.
I've seen some of those.
Yeah,
yes.
Open for business. So we'll be making a recommendation to Governor McAuliffe later this year on how we can be better supportive of his economic plans for this new Virginia economy. Air service is key to that.
In our closing minutes, something that we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention to the viewers?
Well, it's I think just the fact that we really are concentrating on making transportation impact their lives.
Yes.
Whether it's through getting to work a little more efficiently, or getting goods and services a little less complicated. That's what we've been focused on, really. And this legislation that we've done, the projects that we put in place are really focused on that, trying to keep. I'll give Governor McAuliffe very, very all kudos. He has chosen governance over politics. He really has looked at what's the right thing. He's never come in and said, I want you to do this. He said, I want you to solve this problem. And so I think he really has been a great leader in this, and I think that's what I'd like the citizens to know. We're really focused on solutions. First time for me in the political realm. I'm not sure I have it all figured out, but I'm really focused on, with the governor, just getting things done.
Secretary Lane, thank you so much for being on This Week in Richmond.
Thank you so much for having me.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com.
Alpha Natural Resources, a leader in mine safety and an environmental steward.
Haley Buick GMC in Richmond and online at haleybuickgmc.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community.
The Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.